Welcome to the Crucible, episode 5. Today, it is I, Tiny Grimes, as always, and I was not able to hook up my schedule with Mike, the Rebel Spy, the last couple weeks. That's why there wasn't a show. So instead, we get this beautiful, handsome man, if you're watching the video, Neil, the real deal. He got his moniker back in the Star Wars LCG days. I've seen him judging L5R events, and he is a big-time competitive Game of Thrones player. What I'm trying to tell you is we have a veteran of FFG card games here today. And Neil, welcome to the show. How you doing today?
Thank you so much for that warm welcome. I'm doing very well. I'm excited to talk about yet another great FFG game, or hopefully it'll be great, Keyforge, which I'm pretty excited for.
Hey man, you know the title of the game. You're on your way.
It's a good start.
So I guess I'm going to ask you the question that I ask everyone when I talk to them. Why Keyforge? Like, why are you intrigued enough to actually come on a podcast and talk about the show? What is it about this game that has you excited?
There are a couple of things about the game that I really like. I think that in general, when I play card games, I play a little more tactically. I'm not always the best deck builder, even though I enjoy coming up with crazy ideas. I feel like a lot of my strengths are looking at my hand of cards, figuring out the best way to get advantages this turn and the next turn with them. So to me, that's sort of right where Keyforge is play-wise. And then I am really drawn to the unique game aspect, both because I think that it will be a really cool and fun way to get the feeling of having your own personal collection of cards without the expense and I think the sort of opportunity of falling down the rabbit hole that a full CCG provides. Plus, I just really love sort of new ideas in games, and I think that this is such a fresh, unique take on what a competitive card game could be that I'm excited for the ride, even if it maybe falters, maybe falls short of some of those expectations. I think it's going to be a cool, crazy experiment.
All right. I like that. I definitely wanted to talk to you about deck building because when I think of you, Neil, I think of not always like a tier 1 deck builder, but a guy who loves building crazy decks. Like when we first met you, you brought the most insane decks ever to Star Wars LCG, and I feel like it took some real wrangling on our part to even make you play tier 1 decks. So I feel like this is an interesting space for you where you're sort of forced to play whatever this deck is, but it takes away that joy of making crazy decks. Do you feel like you're going to miss it a lot, or do you feel like I can just get that in other games anyway?
I think that I'm still going to be playing the Game of Thrones game, so I think that I'll be able to get my fix there for building crazy decks and losing with them. What I'm excited about for Keyforge is that back in college, I played L5R with my roommate in college, and this was back before it was an LCG. It was still a CCG, buying random boosters and all of that, and we made a pact. We agreed, okay, we're just going to buy like 2 starters each, and if we ever buy packs, we'll buy them evenly, so we'll always be on the same sort of level playing field. That lasted maybe a week or two.
Let me ask you, which one of you broke the pact?
I think it was probably me. I was going to the game shop more often than he was. But
what a jerk.
But it's so tempting with those sort of random card pools and deck building games. I love the feeling of like I have to figure out how to work with my collection to sort of have my personal deck. But I hate that I always fall down the slippery slope of, well, if I just buy a couple singles, if I just buy a couple more packs, like it'll be okay, and you end up in that never-ending chase. So I'm really hoping that Keyforge strikes the balance for me of making me feel like I have my own collection, but that I won't be buying hundreds of Keyforge decks searching for the perfect thing.
Yeah, I've made this pact several times in games. I did it in Magic back in like 1992. or
Yeah.
like 93 maybe. And I broke the pact, sort of, Neil. I didn't entirely break the pact. We said you couldn't buy any packs outside of it. So I went to the Magic shop and bought singles. That was never stated that you couldn't do that. It was only implied heavily. But the hilarious thing is I only spent like $5, but I bought like Crawworm for like a dime. But in our collection, he was a beast. And just like all those sort of commons that are at the top of the power curve. And then I did the same thing with the Star Wars TCG, the second one, the Wizards one. My brother and I did that. And then one day I just bought a box of the current set, and he was like, "What have you done? Now you're going to win every game." And I was like, "I know. That's the whole point." Yes. For me, deck building is interesting because I would say my focal point has always been to like take a tier 1 deck and then make it even better. And so it's like in the minutia, in the 1 to 5 card change. And that's the area of this game where you absolutely cannot do. Because what you can do is say like, I think this archetype is good. I will buy several packs until I get that archetype. But what you're not going to be able to do is say, this I think is the perfect 36 card deck. If you try to chase that deck, you're gonna go.
Oh no. Yeah. That way lies madness.
Yeah. So that's gonna be challenging. But I gotta say, Neil, I don't know if you followed where I'm at with gaming these days, but it has gone off the rails with my organizational system. Like John and I will go to a Star Wars Destiny tournament, and it'll be like a regular card. I'll have like 5 of this card. I'm like, John, can I borrow this card for the tournament? And he's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, I don't know where they are, John. They're somewhere in my house. I can't find them anymore. It's terrible.
It's really tough. I have to spend, every couple of weeks, I just have to spend like half a day resorting my Game of Thrones cards.
Yeah. I'm so excited to just be like, this is my box of decks. I am now playing this deck. Oh, that sounds amazing to me. Just amazing.
I'm excited for that ease of use. That'll be very cool.
Yeah. Okay, so you are pretty excited. How many games have you played of Keyforge?
I want to say I played around 5 or 6.
Okay, and have you done this online, in person?
Yeah, all of them online on Tabletop Simulator.
Okay, cool. And who have you been playing with? Some of our friends?
Yeah. I taught our friend Tyler how to play, and we spent quite a while playing through 3 or 4 games, and that was really good. It was fun, and we both tried and switched up decks every time so that we could see a lot of different stuff.
Okay, cool. And is there a reason you didn't play me? Is it because you don't like me anymore, or what's going on there?
I just didn't want you to feel too bad after having a winning record against you in Destiny.
That's
I was
true.
I was a little afraid of getting racking up the score too high before you had enough time to practice.
It's a good point. You don't want to humiliate me in all the games I'm supposedly good at. I appreciate that, Neil. I really do appreciate that. All right. Well, where I wanted to start today is with some big time news, and that is, if you missed this, there was a document that I don't know if I want to say leaked, but it got out. Someone has it, and that is the organized play formats. They're out there. The actual official formats, the sort of like encouraged variants, and this is really exciting stuff to me because this kind of says to me that FFG is handling this game differently than they have been other games, where generally it feels like they release the game, they kind of wait a little while, and they're like, yeah, okay, fine, I know people want to play in tournaments, I guess we'll do some stuff. This feels like they're really buying in early that organized play is what is going to drive this game. Did you happen to see any of these formats, Neil?
Yeah, I saw this document. One of our friends sent it to me, and I was so excited to see the variant formats. Some of these are really cool, and I almost hope, I want to play them first before I get too ahead of myself, but I could see some of them being very cool long-term competitive formats that feel even better and perhaps more balanced than a sort of straight normal tournament.
Yeah, I totally agree. So let's look at what the normal formats are. First of all, it says that best of 3 matches. Have you found your Keyforge matches to be fast?
No.
I have not either. I mean, I can understand why yours would be slower, right? You're just sort of getting started with the game.
Right.
Keyforge matches are not super fast. They're like around the 30-minute mark. Certainly, sometimes you're done faster. Sometimes it takes longer. A best 2 out of 3, like that could be an hour and a half. How much time do you foresee FFG giving us per round?
Yeah, I think that it would have to be about hour and a half rounds. I guess my guess is that they would start with like hour 10 minutes and then adjust from there. That's sort of what they did with L5R. That
Okay.
they started it a little low and then gave a little more time for at least a while
Yeah.
people were adjusting. Because that's also a much slower game than even something like Keyforge. So maybe fitting in best of 3 in an hour 10 minutes, it'll be interesting. It's always an interesting headache to see what they decide for sort of when games go to time
Yes.
and the tiebreaker
Yeah.
shenanigans are. So that's one thing that I think could greatly affect how good a best of 3 format is. If games are going to time all the time, how good is that tiebreaker?
Yeah, and it feels like the tiebreaker is kind of obvious in Keyforge. It's like, how many keys have you made? If you're tied, how much amber do you have? Which really seems to favor sort of like the faster decks, right? If your deck is fast and steals more, then you would be able to, you know, in that third game, be able to make that 1 key before your opponent could make one. So, I don't know. And maybe that's a good thing. Maybe we don't want a tiebreaker format that favors slow decks so that you can't finish any rounds.
Yeah.
Maybe that's fair. All right, so the 2 main supported formats, supposedly at least, are going to be 1, sealed. Players purchase and use an unopened deck. Neil, how excited are you for sealed?
I'm pretty excited. It feels like it's sort of, in a lot of ways, the easiest format for people to run, as long as they have product, which we'll see how that works. So I'm really excited to try it. I think that it'll be enjoyable. I could see it getting to a point where sealed is a little less interesting because you get a little unlucky with your pull of a deck, but no, I think that it'll be the hot format to start, so I'm really excited to get into it.
Yeah, I'm definitely disappointed with how they decided to make sealed. I agree that this is the perfect welcome to Keyforge format. It costs what, $10, $15, and you're ready to play Keyforge. Welcome. That part's great. And what I also like about it is at the end of the event, you have another deck for your collection. It's not like you have a pile of crud from a set that you've already completed. You have a full deck. So those are all awesome. But like you said, and I've definitely found in my many games of Keyforge, there's a wide gap between the decks. There are some bad decks. There are some amazing decks. What I was hoping sealed would be was either buy 2 or buy 3 and choose one of your decks. And what I would say is players purchase up to 2 or 3 decks. So that if a player wants to come in and just buy a deck, that's fine. But you have the option to buy like 2 of them in case you get, you know, a terrible deck.
Would you have to buy those decks immediately at the same time, or would you get to open your first deck, realize it's no good, and then opt into buying your second deck?
I'm fine with either, but I think if we're trying to make this the more casual format, I think it'd be better just to say you can buy them one at a time.
Oh, okay.
And then that way, you know, you could spend $15 and go, my deck's fine. I'm good. Or you know, it's total garbage. It's not a wasted event. I'd like another one. Like a mulligan. It's a mulligan on decks, Neil.
Most expensive mulligan I've heard of, but I dig it.
It's actually how Keyforge plays. Mulligans are, you give your opponent $10 and then you get a mulligan. I feel like because of this just open one and play one, I think this will be wildly popular at first, and people will quickly realize this doesn't work unless FFG just does an amazing job with handicapping decks. We're sort of assuming it's chains, maybe it's some other method, but if they do a great job handicapping, this will work great.
Yeah. Yeah, if they have an algorithm in to sort of immediately apply that handicap, that would be very cool.
Yeah.
I imagine that it'll settle down to being like a once per month sort of thing, maybe at the regular places.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's like, yeah, I'll buy a new deck this month. We'll do a little sealed tournament.
Yeah, I could see that. I think at the beginning, that's what we're going to see everywhere. Is just, let's just play sealed. And then Archon is sort of what you expect. Players bring and use a deck. But what I love about it, players can also just purchase a new deck, which of course they can, right? They need a deck. They could purchase it right there. I could see myself doing that for fun if it's like, you know, a tournament that doesn't matter, like a weekly funsies tournament.
Oh, yeah.
I roll up with my awesome deck, and there's a bunch of people who are like, I've never played Keyforge. And they're like, you know what? I'm going to buy a deck and roll with it. Let's have fun tonight.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
that'll be very cool. I'm not super excited for this version of the Archon format, just bringing one single deck.
Yeah.
It feels like, especially in a small group, that will get solved somewhat quickly.
Yep.
I mean, I guess if people are buying new decks all the time, you'll find new, more powerful or counter decks. But I still feel like just bringing one deck, especially with the variants just below this, I'm not as excited.
And I gotta say, I think this is, like, I assumed it was going to be best of one, and if it's best of one, then the Archon seems like the format they would choose. But if it's best of three, this feels like a straight mistake to make Archon the normal format. Because that's just, if it's going to be best of three, we've already seen with other games like Hearthstone that the best way to do it is not to do best of three with one deck, it's to have multiple decks, and especially with how cheap they are in this game. Okay, so what I think we're going to be able to pull off as a community is, hey, FFG, this variant should become the norm. And that's basically what happened with Hearthstone, right? Is people started using different types, and then eventually the community all just kind of decided on, like, this is the best format, and then Blizzard was like, yes, it is the best format. Like, all right, good choice, Blizzard. So I could easily see FFG coming around to one of these other formats. This may simply be, this is the easiest place to start from. We don't have to demand people buy 3 decks, 5 decks. Just buy the one and come. So let's look at the variants. I think we're both more excited about the variants. Should we just go down in order, Neil?
That seems like the easiest way. Let's do it.
And then at the end, we'll say what our favorite one is. Okay.
Sure.
So the sealed auction, this is kind of complicated. Players purchase an unopened deck. Each deck is open and shown to all players. And then an auction for which decks players will use for the tournament takes place. So you're going to start by nominating a deck at random. Neil's deck, we're going to start there. And then the player who opened begins by bidding a number of change they will start each of their games with. And it'll go around clockwise until all of the players pass or have a deck. That is fascinating. Oh, by the way, the last thing is return each deck to the player who purchased it at the end of the tournament. So you are not bidding to keep it, you're just bidding to play with it in the tournament. This is a pretty fun and crazy format, Neil. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that it's cool, and I'd love to try it, but I feel like the sort of bookkeeping involved is going to be a real headache, and is really a much more advanced format than I think even some of these other variants where everyone has to look at each deck that's opened and have enough experience that they can get a feel for how good is this deck, what does it do, how well does it match up against all of these other decks that have been opened. And depending on the size of the tournament, you would have to at least break it down into pods of players if you were doing a huge tournament. But even then, that's so much to keep track of and then
Yeah.
do the bidding.
Oh yeah, I agree. I feel like, to me, the ideal scenario for this is an invitational world championship with the 8 best players in the world invited, and then do this. Like, to me, this would be a really great format for that. But you're definitely right. Like a 45-person tournament, the auction itself would take like 5 hours.
Yeah, you'd have to break it into pods of 8, like you were saying, and then sort of like other games, at least Game of Thrones, when they do the draft format. Even if it's a giant tournament, you break down to groups of 8.
Yeah.
And then the winners move on to a new group of 8.
Yeah. I would also like to see this played amongst like friends who are really competitive at the game. You know, like a bunch of us get together, we all consider ourselves really good, and we make it more interesting, right? We say the winner of this tournament gets first choice of the deck they want to take home with them. Something like that. And put quite a bit on the line. I think that could be fun. The bottom line is, I think we agreed sealed to auction is probably not going to be viable in most scenarios, but it sounds like a really heavy skill test.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So I'm real excited to do it, but not for several months, right? Like, we got to get everyone up to speed. Everyone has to know all the cards. You can't have people like, hold on, I need to read all the cards of all the decks. Like, nope. You got like 2 minutes with each deck. Figure out how much you like it. All right, let's move on to the next one. We've got adaptive. Players bring or purchase a deck. Each best of 3 game match, players will use their own deck for the first game and their opponent's deck for the second game. If a third game is necessary, players will take turns bidding, starting chains on the deck. Wait, what? This isn't quite worded right. That's okay. They'll take turns bidding the starting chains that you will start on the deck, which won both games beginning with its owner. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, I think that this is a very cool format. And as we go through the rest of these variants, we'll see that the next two sort of build on this best of 3 idea in other ways with multiple decks, but this is sort of the baseline. And I think it's a really nice way to have a best of 3 where you're changing decks with the minimum amount of equipment, I guess, the minimum amount of decks needed.
This is probably my least favorite for a super competitive format, because I kind of feel like half of the point of this game specifically, since there's not deck building, is like understanding exactly what your deck does and what it's good against and what it's weak against, and just being like, here you go, you saw your opponent play this deck, you don't even know the cards in it, good luck with it, and then having like acquaint yourself really quickly. I think that's interesting. I'm just not sure it's the best way to skill test, and I know this is going to sound weird, Neil. I'm not super excited about a random stranger screwing with my deck. Like, if it's you and I, this sounds fun, but if it's me and the dude that's been eating tacos during the game, like, I don't really want him messing with my stuff.
Yeah, I feel that it is a bit of a weird feeling to just hand your deck over for 1 or 2 games. I do think that it's kind of interesting because it's not like you have no idea what's in their deck after the first game. You've just played against it and maybe gotten crushed by it or seen, oh, they missed that play. I'm going to do this better when I play their deck. So I think that there's a little bit of nice learning going on from that.
Yeah, I could see this being the format that John and I play the most, actually. Like, I foresee myself most often when I play Keyforge is going to be going over to my friend John's house and us playing, and I can definitely see it being like, all right, John, you think you're better than me? Let's see. You know, we'll play adaptive. We'll see who's really the better player. That, I think, is going to be really fun. In a tournament setting, I'm a little less excited for this variant just versus other variants.
That's fair.
All right, let's move on to the next one then. Survival. Players bring or purchase 2 decks. Each round they use 1 deck of their choice and can no longer use that deck if they lose that round. Players are eliminated as they run out of decks to use.
This is super cool.
Yeah.
It's really interesting having basically double elimination, but you have two different decks, and it feels like if there was a way of having a, it doesn't work for Swiss, right? That's what I'm trying to get to.
Yeah. There's no Swiss with this. This is
There's no
just like
Swiss with this.
different.
It's just a straight double elimination tournament. So it requires it to be a small enough pool or some sort of seeding really going into the tournament in
Hmm.
some way or fashion. So I think it could be pretty cool at higher levels, but your weekly your weekly meetup might not want to use this. I don't know.
Yeah. The only weakness is that less skilled players are done after 2 rounds in a tournament that might go 6 rounds.
Yeah.
And that's what you're getting at, right? That's the weakness of the weekly tournament of Joe losing the first 2 rounds and then going, so what do I do now? Do I just go home?
Yeah.
Like, I drove all the way here. I don't really want to go home. And it's like, no, we can still have fun playing Keyforge. And you're like, yeah, I know we're kind of having fun playing Keyforge, but they're still playing a tournament, and this just doesn't feel right to me. I could see a lot of players getting annoyed by that.
Mm-hmm.
And then especially if they decide to use seeding, I have a feeling most stores won't use seeding because it's dangerous, right? People get pretty pissed when you're like, you're actually the 14th seed. And you're like, what? I am not the 14th seed. I played Neil last week and I whooped him and he's the 9? Like, you could see some stuff happening with that.
Yeah. Yeah, I suppose that's true. I don't know.
Having said that, though, this format really excites me. This is the one I've been talking about for a while. I said I think you should bring 3 decks, and then it's triple elimination, and that would work in a
Wow.
smaller field. But it makes people, even if you lose right away, you got to play 3 games. That's not so bad. I also didn't think it would be best of 3 matches. I was thinking in like a best of 1 kind of format.
Sure.
And I think this works better in a best of 1. It lets the tournament move along a lot faster, just having 1 round.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah, I like that.
Let's move to the last one, the Gauntlet.
Oh
Players
yeah.
bring or
Yeah.
purchase 3 decks. We're up to 3 decks, Neil. Before each best of 3 match, players choose one of their opponent's decks to bench. Players secretly choose which of their other 2 decks to play for the first game and must switch decks when they win. Ooh, I like this a lot, Neil.
This feels like the most sort of competitive skill testing one to me because you really have to know all of these matchups, be able to evaluate their decks, your decks, how they compare, and be able to win with 2 different decks.
Mm-hmm. I like this a lot. I like this a lot better than having to lose with all your decks, because if you have one totally busted deck that I keep having all these thoughts, Neil. I have a hard time envisioning a world where FFG handicaps decks perfectly, right? Like, in that
Right.
world, all of these formats work differently. But in the world I'm envisioning, FFG is always a little bit behind. So a deck that is amazing theoretically won't lose, and so like in survival, you'll have your one deck that loses, but then your other deck sweeps the table. And I love that about Gauntlet, that both your decks have to win.
Yeah, I think that that's a really smart choice, and that also if you have one deck that supposedly is unbeatable and your opponent recognizes that,
Yeah.
they just bench it.
And you know what? They'll be able to recognize it pretty easily. They go into the app and they go, "Oh, Tiny's 87-0 with his deck. Not today, Tiny. Not today."
It'll be interesting to see how much access during a tournament you have to the app. Are you going to be able to look something up like that right before a match, or is the app really just going to be used as a tournament organization tool that
Yep.
you sort of use at the beginning to sign up?
Yeah, I don't know. There's so much interesting stuff there that we don't know. I feel like this app, there's so much mystery around it, and it's so critical to all of this. If done perfectly, I think this would be one of the greatest games ever made. But perfectly is really tough to do. I don't even know what that would mean, Neil. But even if it's done well,
Right.
it's going to be really good.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that that's definitely true of the competitive version of the game. I think that playing with your friends
Yeah.
can probably get away with not using the app as much, but for sure on the competitive scene, that app's gotta work magic to make everything run smoothly.
Yeah. And the Gauntlet is so cool because you're like, these are my 3 best decks, but they're really similar, right? And so, like, if I run into counters to them, is it a problem for me to have 3 similar decks, or do I want to have decks that span all the different archetypes? Like, I think there's going to be a lot of strategy that goes into building the perfect Gauntlet.
That's really interesting. I hadn't considered that because of all of the unique decks, you could eventually fish to get 3 of a very similar build, all 3.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then it kind of doesn't matter what they bench,
Right.
but also, like you said, oh, man,
Yeah, there's
there's
gonna be
levels to
ton of
this. I like
strategy
this.
there. So I don't know. I'm excited. So let's circle back. Which of these variants or which format would you like to see at the beginning, and then which are the ones you're most excited about? Which is the ones you want to play in a tournament? Where are we at with these variants?
I'm most excited overall about Gauntlet. I think that I would be so pleased and excited to see that at the like World Championships. Just that's the format, 4 worlds. Let's do it. I think that that would speak really well to the skill involved in the game and really show that even though there's no deck building, there's a lot of team building for your Gauntlet team of Archons.
Yeah, and I really like how you put that this kind of makes up for the no deck building, right? That there is kind of a building element to it. I totally agree. Gauntlet is what I'm most excited about. I hope that once things get rolling, that becomes the norm. But I'm also really excited for sealed auction amongst highly skilled groups. I think that will be really fun if, like, we can get a little SoCal Invitational together and say, like, we're going to get the 8 best players we know, and we're going to figure out who's best in SoCal, and we're going to do the sealed auction to figure it out. I think that would be really fun as well.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to Adaptive as well, especially starting out because it only requires each player to have 1 deck as opposed to Gauntlet where you both have to have 3.
Yeah.
So even though there's some qualms about like trading decks with your opponent, I like most of the people I play with, so I'm not too worried about that, and I think that Adaptive will be a fun way to get a little bit more of a competitive format even at the very beginning.
That's cool. I can fix that for you. I've got some pretty sticky foods I've got in mind to eat while we play. Yeah, I agree. I think to be honest, Adaptive is going to be the format I play the most. I think it's going to be fun, and I think that will be what I play the most. I didn't get to ask you this question, Neil. Speaking of Gauntlet, how many decks have you pre-ordered?
I have not pre-ordered any yet. I plan on buying all of my decks from my local game stores.
Good job.
So I'm going to probably talk to them once there's more of a firm idea of when exactly it's coming out. And I'm aiming to probably start with like 5 or 6 decks and then pretty often be playing sealed, so picking up more decks as I go.
Okay. I bought the Team Covenant starter thing, the whole box. I bought a core and like 3 other decks. And then I also plan on buying them at my whatever ends up being my game store. That's the problem in SoCal. We have so many game stores. It's hard to figure out like what is going to be the store that's actually going to support what game, unless it's called Magic.
Right. Yeah, it is a little bit split up. I'm sure you've been over this before, so I don't want to waste too much of the audience's time, but I am curious to talk to you very briefly. Your feelings on the core set and its value.
When I bought the core set, I thought it was 4 distinct decks. I did not realize it was 2 decks that everyone has.
Right.
And that makes me think that it is not worth buying.
Yeah.
Personally. And I don't know how the pre-order is where I pre-ordered it, but I might cancel that. Like, I'm just not sure that it's worth having. I have plenty of tokens from other games. I rarely use like the cheap cardboard basic tokens anyway. There's a very high probability I cancel that part of the pre-order.
Yep, those are my thoughts exactly. So I was just curious if you had anything different.
And I'm glad you brought it up, because I was saying before I thought it was a good deal because I thought it was just for random decks. I don't fully understand the 2 of the same deck unless they're planning, like, if one of the formats had been play with the starter decks as a true test of skill, like everyone uses the same deck or something, maybe, but I don't, like, in a game that's all about your own unique deck, I don't get it. I mean, I guess the rule book is probably going to do one of those, like, here's how to play the first 5 turns, and then it'll be like, you know, the one deck, and they'll walk you through it. But I just feel like Keyforge doesn't really need that.
Yeah, I guess that they were thinking there's an edge case where it's possible that if they just did 4 random decks, there's an edge case where someone gets 4 super complex, crazy, unintuitive decks in their starter. But that feels like such a small chance.
Yes.
That they should have just gone with all random. But anyway.
Yeah. I'm a little surprised, but still,
if you don't play other card games, I think then it's still a fine thing to do to get the tokens that you need. But if you're someone like us who has tons of other cards, tons of other tokens, especially from FFG where they're crazy about tokens, should be fine without it.
Yeah. Is it cost 40? Is that right?
Yeah.
So if decks cost 10 and that costs 40, so you're getting $20 for your decks, and then you're basically paying $20 for components is the way I'm looking at it.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. That doesn't seem like a great deal to me. Unless those starter decks are amazing, Neil. They totally screw up and everyone shows up to the tournament. I've got my starter decks. You're like, dang it. Everyone's running the same deck. What did we do? Please, FFG, don't have done that.
Yeah, I don't want to live in that world.
Yeah, I don't think anyone does. Okay, so that's organized play. I guess real quick, overall assessment, I'm pretty darn excited, actually, that FFG is being this proactive about organized play, that the game isn't going to be out for, I don't know, I'm going to guess at least 2 months, and we have this much thought already put into organized play. That excites me.
Yeah, I'm certainly optimistic. It always sort of depends on how much follow-through they have and prize support to really get people out and playing. But this is such a good step in the right direction that it just increases my excitement even more. Let's do it.
Yeah, one really cool thing that I hadn't really thought about is prize support. Instead of a store giving you a pack, like I know you don't play games with packs, but I play Destiny, right? And you win a tournament and they give you 3 packs, and it's 3 packs of garbage. And you're like, okay, cool. I got 3 packs of garbage. This is like you get 2 decks. That's kind of cool. Even if they're not great, they're decks.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't know. That's pretty exciting. All right, well, there was another document that was released, and that was the Keyforge launch party and some stuff about organized play. And essentially, this document, it basically tells us some of the prizes, and it says that it's this kit, these discovery kits, support 4 weekly tournaments for up to 8 players and 1 larger monthly tournament for up to 16. So that's pretty cool. These kits are going to support like a whole month of stuff. They come with active house cards, stun cards, bags of tokens, power cards, premium active house card sets, 1 champion playmat, and a poster. Sounds pretty interesting for just your like random let's play each week kind of kit. That's not too bad.
It does sound pretty good. And I know I've had friends who've been excited about the prizes for Netrunner Worlds, which I think was this past week or is soon. I don't know the timing on it, but they were excited that FFG seemed to be stepping up again the quality and quantity of their prize support for that event. And I think that this sort of follows that trend. The one thing that worries me is the cost. Is it going to be so expensive that stores are going to have to charge you an entrance fee for all 4 weekly tournaments and a larger monthly tournament? Ooh. So I'm having to pay money every single week I come in just to sort of play quote-unquote casually because everyone wants to do this tournament? I don't know.
Yeah, that's something I hadn't thought about. And I guess we'll have to see. Hopefully it won't be too much. I will definitely echo your sentiment that it seems like FFG's been getting better at this. Like Destiny seems substantially better than Game of Thrones. Perhaps this is building upon that. Destiny, of course, has the weakness of they pick alt art cards, but they're picking like 8 months ahead. And so it's like, we picked a great card for 8 months ago, and then you're like, the meta changed, and that card is a dead card. And you're like, dang it! When we chose
it's
it,
also
it
going to
was
be interesting.
Awesome.
It's going to be interesting because FFG has relied so heavily on alt arts for their prize support in the past.
Yep.
You can't really do alt arts of actual in-deck cards for this because every single one of them is unique.
Yeah, you can, but it'd be tough, right? Because it's like you'd have to have the other card there so that when your opponent goes, hey, that doesn't say your Archon on it, you can be like, I know, here's the regular card, it's right behind it or right next to me, here you go, see it has the Archon on it. And then it becomes this whole thing of like, do you really want to say that every time you see an alt art and you're demonstrating you don't trust the guy, and then some jerk decides to sneak in some card that's not in his deck? Yeah. It's kind of a can of worms.
Yeah, which I think is why you see that this doesn't list any in-deck alt arts, just active house cards, which will be cool to get nice versions of those for sure.
Yeah, definitely, especially for those of us who aren't buying the core set and won't have them.
Yep.
Yeah, so I'm just excited again that FFG is moving in a direction of supporting the game. This also has the launch party that it talks about, where there's going to be 3 elements of the launch party, where you're going to use the quick start rules and starter set to pick up the basics. That's kind of a problem, Neil, if we don't have a course set. Then the next step is discover the unique Archon stuff by downloading the app. And then the third thing is you play 4 rounds of a tournament. And for each of those things you do, it looks like you get something. So, Neil, if you don't have a starter set deck, maybe you can ask to borrow someone's.
Yeah, I hope so. I'm never the biggest fan of these launch parties. They're good for building hype, but at least the people that I'm usually playing with are pretty versed in card games already and already don't need more hype built. And so usually launch days for me are kind of ignoring these using the quick start rules to learn to play steps that I feel like try and force you to do and just playing a bunch of games. But I appreciate for new players, it's really good and important to get people into the store and learning the game. So while it's not for me, I think it's good that they're doing it.
Yeah, and I think you're going to have a very different experience with Keyforge if you jump in right away, because I was the same way, right? I played all those FFG games, and then Destiny was bizarro land. It was like I showed up to one of these launch parties, and it was like 25 people that had no idea how to play Destiny. And I was like, what is happening right now? This is amazing. And I have a feeling Keyforge is going to be similar. I feel like Keyforge draws in the board gamer casual crowd that isn't quite as well versed in card games, and I think there's going to be a lot of faces you're not going to recognize. You're going to be like, cool. I don't know who you people are, but let's play some Keyforge.
I hope so. That would be very cool. That would be great.
Yeah, I was utterly shocked with Destiny and how that went down, but it was really fun. All right. Well, I'm happy to see that FFG is on top of this. We seem to be going in the right direction. Unfortunately, looks like we're out of time, Neil. I had plans to talk in great detail about Untamed, but I think we're going to have to hold that off for next time.
Okay.
If you enjoyed having Neil on the show today, let us know. Let us know in the comments below. Say, you know, Neil's the greatest. Mike, the Rebel Spy, is no good if you want. That's fine. Mike will love that. All right, Neil.
Yeah, that all sounds good to me.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming by. I'm sure we'll have you on again soon, especially as Mike and I try to figure out how to work our schedules with both of us having like full-time jobs and stuff. It's the worst.
Yeah, that sounds pretty lame.
Yeah, I know, man. All right, well, thank you all for tuning in to another episode of Welcome to the Crucible and Archons. We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.